Hey everyone, I'm Luke,
And Max.
and welcome back to the Upside Down Thoughts NASCAR podcast. We are here with the Food City 500 from Bristol Motor Speedway. Another episode of the podcast coming out. Been rifling through these one, trying to get it caught back up, but let's get right into qualifying at Bristol, where we saw Alex Bowman get his first pole of the season, and Ricky Stenhouse Jr., a guy you haven't heard too much this season, join him on that front row.
Yeah, I love this, and I'm actually going to go back to prior to qualifying here. Stenhouse he's having a great season so far. He's right around the playoff bubble, just on points, and I want to mention that he was the fastest in practice, and he was the fastest by a good 6/10 over Ryan Blaney, who we're going to see fade in the qualifying order a little bit from that top 2 or 3. But this is just a phenomenal qualifying start for Stenhouse, as he's been qualifying in the back. He's been working up until like 15th, 20th. Throughout the race, and he's been saying, we just need to qualify better. So he really, found his answer here. He loves Bristol, and he said it's one of his crown jewel tracks personally that he really wants to win at. So it's really great to see that 47 car up there.
Yeah, definitely. And, he's always performed well in the race at Bristol, even going back to the Gen 6 car, in that JTG team. So it's cool to see him qualify. And, he just missed the pole by 1/1000th of a second. So, he is right up there with the top Hendrick guys. Larson in third, no surprise. Hamlin in fourth, no surprise. Blaney in fifth, not really a surprise there. He's been dominant there. Ty Gibbs, Christopher Bell, sixth, seventh. Two Toyota teammates, not a surprise there as well. And AJ Allmendinger in eighth with a brilliant qualifying session and a great practice as well for him. So he's been quietly performing super well this season with that 16 team going back to full time this season.
Yeah, that's a car that has been qualifying, mysteriously well for a Kaulig car. That's a car that, unless he's at a road course, especially, being AJ Allmendinger and being that road course merchant that he is, to see him putting up these times at these short tracks, intermediates, he's putting up these good starts in the top 10, top 15, and kind of throwing his name into the hat, not necessarily for the wins at these tracks, but giving himself a shot for top 5s, top 8s, top 10s, and it's really great to see that improvement for Kaulig overall. So he's doing a great job in that car so far this year.
Yeah, definitely. But then running out the top 10, Hocevar and Haley, two Spire teammates. Hocevar has been unreal this season in qualifying and in the racing, just showing a ton of confidence, like we've said previously. And then Josh Berry, just missed that top 10 qualifying position, but we said his name every single week. So no surprises there. Yeah, he is he's a crown jewel of the podcast, if you could say.
Yeah, for sure. And it's, we mention it week in and week out. Great to see him doing that with the Wood Brothers car. But right behind him, another name that, we don't probably talk about enough. And when we are, it's probably for the wrong reasons. It's Ty Dillon in the number 10 Kaulig car. This is his best start of the season. So it's really great to see him up there. And following him, you've got Michael McDowell and the Joe Gibbs number 19 of Chase Briscoe in 14.
Yeah, and you mentioned Chase Briscoe as, I think he was your pick to win this race, right?
He was, yeah.
Yeah, so, Martin Truex, the guy prior in the car before Briscoe took over this season, been super good at short tracks, and Toyota and that JGR team as a whole, they're always going to be up there qualifying well and, having a fight to win. So Briscoe's been doing, in my opinion, substantially well for the shoes that he had to fill.
Yeah, for sure. And he is, we mentioned him in 14th. He's the worst qualified Joe Gibbs car out of the 4. So that just goes to show you how much speed they truly do bring to these short tracks. And that's why he was my pick to win, because I was like, this car's going to have speed. It always did with MTJ behind the wheel. And, maybe it'll carry over to Chase Briscoe. He's a great, I say young talent. He's not super young anymore, but, in his mid-20s. So I thought he would be out there with a great shot to win the race.
Yeah, for sure.
But behind him, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, you're good. Go ahead.
Behind him, we got the Struggle Bros, Kyle Busch and Brad Keselowski, sharing row 8. These are two guys that we mentioned week in and week out and having their struggles. And this is, some of the closest starting positions to the front that we've seen for these guys all season so far.
Yeah, it's definitely, they're starting to pick up the qualifying efforts a little bit. as we've seen in these later podcasts that we've done. So hopefully this kind of momentum will carry into the race, and it really hasn't yet. But the qualifying's been there, so maybe they can hopefully build off of it. But right behind Brad is the other RCF teammate of Austin Dillon, who's been right around that playoff bubble, just a little bit outside of it. But he's been, quietly, grinding, if you could say. He's kind of put his head down and, just decided to run pretty well in some of the races that we've covered. But hopefully he can build off some of the top 10 runs that he's had this season.
Yeah, that's what he needs to do. His starting spot here basically shows you exactly where he is in terms of the point standing, 17th. So if you mentioned him putting his head down, and if he can continue to do that, he'll find himself inside that bubble in no time. He just needs to continue to grind out those high point finishes and get as many stage points as he can.
For sure.
But moving on from there, we see back exiting or on the backside of row 10, we'll see Chase Elliott in the 9 car. He's a great skilled driver that's been in the back here, and we're going to see another one of his Hendrick teammates back in 26th, William Byron. So I'm kind of curious what your opinion might be on the lack of Hendrick effort here in qualifying, besides the 5 of Kyle Larson and the 48 of Alex Bowman.
Well, it's tough because Chase Elliott. I don't know if you know this stat. He has not finished outside the top 20 yet in the races that we've covered. So I don't really think qualifying is an issue for Chase. Byron, I don't think qualifying is a problem for him. I think Bowman, even though he's qualified on the pole, I think qualifying has been a pretty bad effort so far this season. But if you're talking about Chase Elliott, I don't think qualifying. He has been qualifying well, but I seriously don't think it's any issue for him at all.
Yeah, it'll kind of be interesting. We're a few weeks ahead, so to see where he'll end up finishing this race, because I don't exactly remember it, it'll be really interesting to me as we're kind of going through his podcast to find out. But Bristol, a really difficult track to pass, especially with the short track package. We'll get into that a little bit later as we delve deeper into the race, but it'll be interesting to see what he does throughout this race for sure.
Yeah, definitely. But moving along, just wanted to touch on the 2311 team and their qualifying efforts. Bubba Wallace, 22nd, Riley Earps, 25th, and Tyler Reddick in 27th. So just very, very poor, especially from the JGR Toyota speed. Very interesting when I was watching qualifying, those guys qualify so far back here with that kind of 4-star team that we mentioned earlier.
Yeah, it's a little strange to see, especially out of the 45 of Tyler Reddick. He was slow in qualifying, being all the way back in 27th behind his teammate of Riley Herbst, who has really had no noticeable anything so far this year in terms of finishing, stage points, and any move that he has really made this year. So to see Tyler Reddick this far back is quite strange, especially as a Toyota at Bristol, which those two just seem like they love to mesh together and just put together great finishes. But the speed wasn't exactly there for Tyler Reddick, and neither was it for the other two Legacy Motor Club Toyotas of Eric Jones and John Hunter Nemechek.
Yeah, just not the qualifying that they wanted. And they've brought a ton of speed on the short tracks, especially last season. I thought they were qualifying pretty well for where they were at. So unfortunate to see, but we'll follow along with them in the race and see where they end up. But one last guy I wanted to touch on was Ross Chastain in 35th. What is going on with Trackhouse? Suarez in 23rd, Chastain in 35th. I feel like we are always mentioning these guys qualifying in the back and not really being noticeable in the race, kind of being irrelevant this season, if that's the right word.
You're 100% right. And especially with Suarez, that 99 car, you haven't heard that name once on the track. And you mentioned the word noticeable, but I kind of just wanted to use the word almost obsolete. This team, they have the skill and they have the funding and everything. Like we mentioned, RFK's problems with potential funding, which is what could be keeping them out of the front, finishing up front. But I don't really know what this problem is for Trackhouse. This is that Chevy team that is kind of in the same spot as RFK is with the Ford, so maybe they're running into the same problems. But with ownership from Pitbull, one of the greatest music producers in the world, or say great, is one of the biggest music producers in the world, you would think that funding wouldn't exactly be a problem, and especially with their sponsors. But it really hasn't been there. The speed hasn't been there so far this year. So that's another team. I've said it about RFK and Kyle Busch, and I think they will pick it up. I don't think this is a genuine fear for these teams. There's a ton of racing left this year, and they have time and they will improve on it.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. But last guy, Logano, he's running while he qualified in 38th. He had an incident at 2 where he got super, super loose. So, kind of the only guy that really had almost wreck incident in qualifying. That's why he's always all the way back here in 38th. So, nothing to be worried about for that Penske 22 team.
Yeah, and that was just, I think, a routine spin out of turn two, and his crew chief Paul Wolf basically told him to just lock it down and say we'll forfeit our qualifying position to start the race in the back. So he'll be another one to watch. We mentioned Elliott, who's up in 20th, the outside of row 10. It'll be interesting to watch Logano coming from the outside of row 19 all the way back in 38th.
Yeah, for sure. But that's it for qualifying for me. You got any last points to make?
I do not. All yours to get into the race.
All right, let's go. So, Bristol, the spring race here. Got Alex Bowman, Stenhouse on that front row, like we mentioned. For me, I was super excited to see Stenhouse on that front row, just to see what he could be able to do. But quickly, Alex Bowman would take that preferred lane on the bottom and drive away from him as he would get into second. But Denny Hamlin and Ty Gibbs would make their presence known right behind him in third and fourth. And Kyle Larson, obviously qualifying that high, he's going to be a problem as well for those drivers up in the lead, and he would quickly get up there in fourth. But a lot of guys that were trying to run this outside lane just were having a lot of trouble. Ty Gibbs and Carson Hocevar, to be exact. They chose to run that high line for most of these starting laps. And man, they were struggling. Like I said, Bristol, it's mainly, in my opinion, a one lane track that you can run with this package, and that's the bottom. Even on when there aren't marbles on the top, you still just cannot run there and make efficient passes. So those guys dropped pretty far from where they started.
Yeah, you mentioned the one lane track, and we're going to see that conveyor belt style racing, very similar to Martinsville last week. But we're actually going to get a green flag run strung out this week compared to last week. It seems that we spent all the cautions last week, or I should say the week prior, as we're a few weeks ahead. We spent them all at Martinsville. So we will eventually see Bowman clear in front of Stenhouse as we approach lap 30. And Larson, you mentioned, all the way up to fourth already. He will clear Hamlin in front of him, who's per se one of the Bristol merchants. He's great there. He has quite a few wins, quite a few swords. So to see him get just blitzed by the 5 and Kyle Larson just really shows you how much speed this 5 car has, and that potential dominance that we thought Byron had last week at Martinsville that Larson might have here at Bristol.
Yeah, and this is kind of the point when I was watching that I was like, okay, here comes Kyle Larson, and this, for lack of better words, this is where the race is going to get kind of boring, because it's only going to be a matter of time till he takes the lead and runs away with this thing, like we're going to see in a little bit. But we'll get there when we get there. But just wanted to touch on Justin Haley. He would emerge himself in the top 5, who we mentioned in qualifying in 9th. But he would consistently be battling these top guys in these top 5 positions, and he would actually challenge Larson after he overtook Hamlin and seriously gave him a run for his money for a little bit through these opening green flag runs. So super cool to see, like you mentioned before, the Spire team making very, very strong adjustments and advancements, as you can say, in their team. So for him to be battling Kyle Larson, and for how young I like to say Justin Haley is, even though he's in his mid-20s, it's really, really cool.
Yeah, and it's awesome to hear Spire as a team getting talked about as much as they are. I feel like we're talking about them just as much as we're talking about the big 3 and Joe Gibbs, Team Penske, and Hendrick. So it's spectacular for them, as they're this 2-star Chevrolet team that you're not supposed to see inside the top 10 unless you're at a super speedway on complete luck. But Haley, McDowell, Hocevar, they're all just seeming to prove all the haters wrong so far this year.
100%. But just as we were saying Justin Haley was battling Kyle Larson would use his short track magic and get around him with ease. And here comes the freight train in that 5. He would be hauling the mail to try to get up to Bowman. Um, as him and Haley were side by side for so long, it created a bit of a gap. But I mean, within like 2 laps, Kyle Larson would pass him with ease on that outside. And he was the only driver that I noticed that could use any lane of the racetrack and pass. We mentioned passing being such a difficult thing to do in this short track car, especially at Bristol. Um, and I mean, he, in my opinion, was the only one I was seeing so far that was able to do it. So a lot of teams were trying to pick up on what he was doing, but they just couldn't.
Yeah, and this kind of brings the question for me that I want to ask you. I know the last 2 weeks I've been the one asking you the questions, but on here, do you think this is or on this topic, do you think this is a Kyle Larson skill thing, or do you think this is how Cliff and the 5 team have that car set up for him, allowing him to run parts of this track that no one else can?
Um, it's an interesting question because I think it's kind of both. I'm sure the 5 car has that car set pretty loose. Larson does like a loose car, but you know, if it was a 5 car team, then I feel like everyone in Hendrick would also be semi doing it. So, and they weren't. So I feel like Larson, best driver, best stock car driver in the world right now. So I feel like it was also just him being as good as he is and making that pass. But I can only assume. Um, but I don't know. I mean, it's just insane how I keep saying the word insane, but it was just unreal how he was able to pass people on the outside. And just we haven't seen that at all at this racetrack.
Yeah, no, I think this could honestly just be a big part of just the name Cliff Daniels being his crew chief, one of the best crew chiefs in the business, and it's a scary combo seeing him with the best stock car driver in the world. At some points, you look at this whole idea and you're like, well, how did anyone even allow this to happen? Like this just seems
Mhm.
unfair. But
Yeah,
to to see them working together and Cliff knows what Kyle wants. It's you would almost think that Cliff is a driver with how much he seems to know about the cars and what his driver wants. So I think overall it's a great team effort between Cliff, the pit crew setting doing the work on that car that Kyle wants, and obviously Kyle's job behind the wheel to absolutely drive that thing right through traffic and put that car where it needs to be.
definitely great points. But Larson would extend his lead over Haley, who was battling Hamlin for a couple of laps, and Hamlin would quickly overtake him as Haley's car was kind of fading in the position that he was in. It was beyond it was gonna happen soon enough. But this is I'm not gonna lie, guys. This is at the point of the race where I was like, oh god, this is getting pretty boring. Larson had almost a 2-second lead on Hamlin, and we've been running 90 green flag laps. So, and I'm kind of interested in your thoughts. Is it a track issue? Is the short track package? Is it the drivers not pushing themselves in stage 1? But I feel like we always seem to have this problem at Bristol as long as this next gen car has been running here.
Yeah, I'm gonna start first off. I definitely don't think it's a result of it being stage 1. We've seen multiple races this season where we've had stage 1 cautions. They're not always crashes, but at least a caution. As a result of someone hitting the wall or something. So I don't really think the fact that the drivers aren't pushing has anything to do with it just being stage 1. I think this is a whole track problem because we saw Martinsville last week didn't put on a great race, but we mentioned the package being viable overall, which I think it absolutely is, and the track should be able to work with the package, and kind of the track should be adapting to the package or the package adapting to the track. They should be able to build off each other and put together a good race. So I see this as a Bristol thing. I just don't think the short track package is agreeing with it. right now, and it hasn't been. I would say pretty much since we went from Bristol dirt back to the concrete. So that's my opinion on it. I think this is something that it's almost sad, but this is something that NASCAR really needs to work on. And maybe they need to. This is something where I might get hated for this, but maybe Bristol needs to come out of the schedule for a year or two, and they need to take a long, hard look at this track and say, hey, we got to figure something out here, or even the drivers are going to start falling asleep making laps around this place, because you're looking in the grandstands out away from the drivers during the race, and you're saying, wow, this doesn't even look like half the seats are filled, as Bristol's a stadium, and I I feel like for a sport where they're only there twice a year, with even Bristol, they go there twice a year, and you can't even fill up 3/4 of the grandstands, man. I don't know. I think some big evaluations and modifications really, really, really need to be made at Bristol in particular.
So, do you think, because you know how they had that whole tire compound with Goodyear last year, do you think they should go back to that, or do you think they should make kind of that red and yellow tire compound like we see at Phoenix and some tracks like that? Do you think that would fix the problem or help it in a way?
I don't know. I kind of like how the compound worked last year with all the blown tires. I think that would make tire management a lot more of a prevalent subject. But the only problem with that is I think it's really going to slow down the pace of the race overall, because drivers are going to be saving their stuff, and you're going to see drivers a lot slower. And I think you kind of see that same problem with the yellow and reds. With the reds just being so much faster that you burn them that much faster, and I just don't think I don't really think there's an advantage there. Like, track position doesn't gain you anything when you end up having to pit for a new set of tires anyway, and you end up right back where you started. So, do the yellow and reds make a more entertaining race overall? I would say yes, but do they change where anyone finishes? I would say no. So I don't I think that there's something bigger than just the tires or the cars that needs to be made here. I think this is a whole track problem overall, and they did the same thing with Iowa. Iowa got a complete repave. So maybe Bristol needs a repave. Maybe they need to set resin higher up on the racetrack so that they can open up another lane to run, and uh, maybe they need to do something that's going to keep marbles more out of the way. I don't know, because I feel like with marbles gravitating to the top of the racetrack when everyone's running the bottom, I think it completely takes the top lane out of play. But when you have cars running the top from the start to try to gain positions, those marbles are bouncing around, and it doesn't completely shut off the top lane and make it unrunnable. So I think this could be just a whole track thing in general, where the Bristol staff needs to work with NASCAR to open up more lanes to be able to drive on this track.
Those are interesting points because I didn't really think of it as a track problem. Excuse me. I did a lot of reviews like on the car mainly, um, and a lot of the passes that I saw, because of the composite body and not the steel body that this car has, people were just driving through the guy in front of their bumper and just moving him up the lane, and like that was the passes that I saw that were working, um, because of how many drivers just were mirror driving and aero blocking for 50 laps, because they couldn't pass and they didn't want anyone else to pass them. So they're
Right.
like, okay, well, since I can't pass anyone, you're just not going to be able to get around me. And with how heavy and this car is, and how this body can just take so much force, I guess, from other cars, and it can just pop right back into place. I think these drivers are relying a lot on just pounding the hell out of the bumper in front of them to just make passes here. It's kind of sad, honestly.
Yeah, I don't really have a problem with that. I don't think, like, I think that's a great version of racing, but that's what Martinsville's for. Martinsville's that flat half-mile track where the only way to pass should be by bumping someone, and that should be left to Martinsville and Martinsville only. Bristol, it's highly banked. It's a lot faster than Martinsville is, and if you're bumping someone like that to move them up the track, if they lose traction, they overcorrect into the outside wall. You could see something very similar to what Kaz Grala did at Dover or I believe it was last year actually, and you could see some really nasty accidents. There's a few spots at Bristol where the wall pokes out just that little inch or two, and it could, go from a car just rubbing up against the wall barely to a car being, it sounds quite ridiculous, but being split in half by hitting the wall at an awkward angle.
Yeah. Um, Hopefully they get this figured out soon enough, and it isn't in the playoffs. So I'd love to see Bristol just get that feeling back. Because right now it is lost all of its, or I guess you could say. But moving on from that, those
Who
points
knows?
there.
Maybe it will. Yeah,
Yeah,
who knows? Maybe
hopefully.
it will. Maybe NASCAR already sees the problem that everyone has with it right now, and looked and saw that they didn't sell many tickets, and say, we got to do something for the playoff race. Like I don't even know. Like
Yeah,
we mentioned already what we think would make it better, but I mentioned a lot of track changes, and you can't do that in just 1 year unless you're just basically laying down a new layer of resin somewhere on the racetrack to hopefully open up at least half of a lane higher off the bottom. So maybe NASCAR will see that, take that into consideration, and they can make those changes for this fall race already, and hopefully get more fans there looking forward to this race, and hopefully it'll be better.
yeah, definitely. Great points. Great points there as we move on. But Larson would extend his lead to over 2 seconds on Hamlin, and he would lap up to 25th. So you can see kind of why we're really frustrated watching this race. But stage one would end. Larson would pick up his stage win. Not even sure how many he has at this point because we're a few weeks ahead. But he would stage one go caution free, as we mentioned. And Denny Hamlin was second. Justin Haley, great stage for him. He finishes third and gets some much needed points for that Spire number 17. And Bowman and Hocevar would round out the top five. So just great stage by Spire in general.
Yeah, definitely. It's the only one I don't think we said there was McDowell, and even him, he qualified in 14th and finished stage one just outside the top 10. So it goes to show you that all the Spire cars are moving forward, and it's great to see.
Definitely. But like I mentioned, we don't know how many stage wins Kyle Larson has this year, but overall, he'd pick up his 65th career stage win. And that's just one behind Truex at this point. I think he already passed him for the most all time, as we're a few weeks ahead, but I'm not too certain. But a bunch of guys would obviously come into pit. But Larson would lead the drivers off pit road with Hamlin in second. Two of the best pit crews in NASCAR, so no surprise that they would stay on that front row. But that's pretty much it for the stage one conclusion, if you want to add anything.
Yeah, I'm just going to continue to add on to these pit stops here as we see Kyle Busch. The problems just continue. He's nailed for speeding, along with Shane Van Gisbergen at the end of stage one, and Cindric will be penalized as well for pain outside the box. But after a rough qualifying effort for him, he's been kind of mired in the back all race. So that'll lead us to a Larson Hamlin restart for the beginning of stage two. And we'll see Larson yet again fire off well and clear Denny Hamlin for the lead, as Hamlin will fall all the way back to third, as Justin Haley's going to dart through on the inside as well.
Yeah, so Larson just driving off on these restarts. And this one in particular, I saw as I was half semi watching the race, trying not to fall asleep. But I don't know what he does on on these restarts, and it's not even just at the short tracks, which he does a lot. It's at intermediates, even super speedways sometimes when he's up there at some of the stage, green white checkered stage finishes.
He's
But
able to clear
he,
an entire car
yeah,
before
like
the second car even is on the gas.
I don't get it. I'm like, are they going to review that to see if he went early? And just
They
no,
just
like he didn't
don't.
even. It wasn't even close to going early. I mean, he just times it absolutely perfect. And anyone that's listening, please, please, please go watch this back. Like, and you'll understand why I'm so surprised, because no one in the field can do it. Like, no one.
Yeah, it's quite impressive. Like it's it takes me back to last year at Indianapolis, back on the oval. So I don't even I don't even know what to say. He had Ryan Blaney in disbelief last year. He had, was it Hamlin at Richmond, I believe it was,
Yep.
or was it
Yeah,
Truex. He has these drivers in disbelief of how he's able to get off the line so fast, and it almost looks like every restart he's jumping by a mile when he's not.
yeah, no, it's crazy. But like I said, he would quickly increase his lead to almost a second over Haley, who passed Denny Hamlin on the restart. Denny Hamlin had a pretty poor restart to start stage two, but quickly as we would try to get another green flag run, SVG and Cody Ware would make hard contact, battling for 35th, and the caution would come out as the first um, driver incident caution of the day. And this one was interesting to me. Kind of looked like SVG didn't realize how wide his car was, and didn't really realize how quick the corner was coming up, and kind of just drove in there. And Cody Ware did a great job giving him all the room he can, knowing that SVG is a first time Cup Series driver. But unfortunate, I think it definitely was on SVG, and he could have did a better job. But hey, it's his first time racing at Bristol, so I don't really have a problem with it.
Yeah, it's definitely SVG's fault, but to defend him, this is a miserable part of the schedule. If you're a first year driver, we just had Darlington, Homestead, where you basically have to rip the top. If you can't, you're screwed, for lack of better words. So we have Bristol here, the high speed, heavily banked half-mile track in a stadium. You don't see these in New Zealand and Australia, where he's raced his sports cars. So this is very different for him, and about as different as it gets in a form of racing. So to see the effort that he's at least putting in, and how much he's in the garage, you got to give him a little kudos, and say that this is a driver that is definitely going to get better the more he's in here. And he might never get to the point where he's going to be up there searching for wins at these tracks, but maybe he'll get to his point. He'll get to a point in his NASCAR Cup Series career where he'll be searching top 12s, top 15s here at Bristol and tracks
Yeah,
just like it.
hopefully. But Ryan Preece would receive that free pass. Um, and Blaney, Bubba Wallace, Kozlowski, Elliott, all the guys are coming for pit stops. But quickly we'd see Ryan Blaney's crew, who we changed after last week's very, very poor pit performance at Darlington. He would quickly change a few of those tire changers, and they would get him out in 13th position. So I think he gained like 6 or 7 spots on this pit stop, which is huge. But something that I really want to comment on is the 42 of John Hunter Nemechek.
Yeah, now this is interesting.
This is crazy because his lug nut would fly off the car as he was exiting pit road. So it was not even close to being tight for it to fly off that quickly. His tire would fly off the car, spin, and nearly just plow through the 99's gas man or the tire changer. And if you guys don't know, these tires weigh 50 plus pounds. I've picked one up before. It is incredibly heavy, and moving, probably 20 miles an hour, that could seriously, seriously
If
injure
not
someone.
faster.
Yeah, especially with how heavy the gas cans are with how many gallons of fuel those are in. So, whoa, and I know you're going to comment on the single lug nut, but guys, we seriously have to, what are we doing? What are we actually doing?
Yeah. We mentioned fans being the main concern of these tires flying off, like we're racing IndyCar here, but you can't forget about the people on pit road too. And they're wearing fire suits, they're wearing knee pads, glove, whatever. Well, it's not going to protect them from a 50-60 pound tire rolling at them at 25-30 miles an hour.
Yeah.
So and bouncing at head level, shoulder level, let that be known as well. So
Mm-hmm.
these are scary situations, but it luckily ends up hitting the back of Daniel Suarez's car, and we'll end up seeing nothing come of it. But you said that this is my perfect situation to harp on here, but this takes me back to Las Vegas a couple weeks back, and this one's not even close. This tire has to at least be tightened a little more.
Mm-hmm.
And for this is a biased penalty what I'm going to go towards here, but maybe NASCAR needs to introduce a penalty where if your tire comes off already on pit road and could potentially cause harm to a pit crew member, I say the penalty needs to be more harsh, and it needs to be more strict, because someone we mentioned fans being the concern and, and and saying, well, that would be such a crazy incident for something like that to happen, and it would never happen. Well, we just saw one of these scenarios happen with a pit crew guy. So I think there needs to be a more strict penalty, and teams really need to know that if this keeps happening, and uh, a really scary incident is eventually going to be unavoidable, and it's not going to be pretty.
Yeah, for sure. And this is that pro con thing of the single lug nut, like we keep talking about. Yes, it creates quicker pit stops. Yes, it creates less pit crew error with 5 lug nuts, but all it takes is for that one lug nut to fly off, and boom, there goes a tire. In the Gen 6 car, you could lose 1, 2 lug nuts. That thing, yeah, it'd be shaking and vibrating your car all around, but it would stay locked on and prevent this thing from happening where these wheels are flying off race after race. So, I mean, NASCAR has to seriously reevaluate the single lug nut system. You can keep it, but you have to maybe add more protection for this tire to stay on. Maybe improve the lug nut and the wheelbase, and the hubcap. Maybe, make some changes, because I feel like they really have not talked about this too much, in my opinion.
Yeah, NASCAR really has not had much discussion on this topic really at all, and maybe other podcasts need to talk about this, and drivers need to make it a prevalent discussion as well, and say that this is going to cause problems, and it's going to continue to cause problems, and something really really bad could be not that far lurking in the future. So I've said this many many times, and I'm a man of heavy faith, and I trust that NASCAR will make the right decision moving forward.
Yeah, hopefully we can only hope. But I think they definitely have their eye out now after that. But as we move into the green flag run, Kyle Larson, Denny Hamlin, I feel like a robot, broken record. Um, they would restart in the front row, and I mean, again, Larson would just. It almost looked like he had like boost in his car. I mean, it just looked unfair. It looks like he was cheating. I don't know like how to even explain this, guys. You just have to go watch it. Um, it it was just
I'm
incredible.
here laughing.
Like, I just don't know how to explain what he was doing, because I don't know what he was doing. I've never seen someone restart this fast. It looked fake. I
Yeah, it really did. Like we'll see Bowman end up getting around Hamlin, and he's finally like, yes, I'm back up to second. I started first. I'm back up here, and I'm ready to win. And then he looks in front of him, and with how small Bristol goes, he goes, where's the leader?
Yeah,
He,
I
he's
mean,
gone.
you're side by side with someone for 2 laps, and leader is a second and a half ahead of you, 2 seconds ahead of you. I don't understand like how the air is so prevalent with these cars, and with the side drafting, and with aero blocking, and with mirror driving and guys blocking. It's insane how someone can get this big a lead when you're trying to battle someone for like 3 4 laps. And just this past weekend, as we're a few weeks ahead, it happened in Kansas a bunch, which we'll touch on in that podcast, I'm sure. So it's just kind of annoying when, hey, my favorite driver is battling for second. Oh wait, the leader's 5 seconds ahead, because they're aero blocking each other and side drafting. It's just really really annoying. But there's not really much you can change there. The NASCAR is going to have to do a whole lot of work in the offseason to fix the short track package, especially at Bristol.
And everything he says is spot on. As we'll end up going on to watch who else but Kyle Larson win the stage, followed by Bowman, who will remain right where he was after passing Hamlin, and Bell and Hocevar are going to get by Hamlin as well for third and fourth, as Denny will round out the top five.
Yeah, and just want to touch on this point, because I've thought about this before the podcast. We don't want to discredit Larson for how dominant he has been today. And some people might be like, "Oh, but you were praising William Byron last podcast for how good he was." And the reason we were saying so highly is because you can actually pass on Darlington, and there were so many passes and so many battles for the lead in that race. Here, I mean, don't get me wrong, Larson is completely dominating and driving off from everyone, but it's not as impressive as Darlington, because he's so hard to pass here, guys. Like, you could be battling someone for 30, 40 laps, no joke, and still be in the same position that you were in to start the battle. So don't want to discredit Larson, but just gonna make that point.
Yeah, and yeah, Larson is not discredited here, as you said. Like it's just a shame with this track, and Larson, not a super emotional driver. We see him win. You're like, wow, the best in the sport wins another one. Compared to someone like Josh Berry at Vegas, where everyone's like, wow, this is awesome. This guy never wins and never has won, and so it's just it all kind of lined up at a not to call Larson a boring driver, but I'm going to say boring track, boring driver here.
Yeah,
And it's not Larson's fault, but I call Larson boring as he's that dominant driver that's up there quite often, and you see him up here again, you're like, ugh, not again, you know.
yeah. But as soon as we would restart, Larson and Bowman had a super good stop from his pit crew, and which we haven't touched on this season really at all. But he would pass Hamlin in the pits, so Hamlin would start right behind Larson, maybe try to learn some few things if he can even catch up to him on the restart. But Hamlin would quickly clear Bowman right behind Larson, that preferred lane, like we said before. Um, but this is where my heart hurts a little bit for Alex Bowman. Um, we saw that blue smoke come out of his car, and he would quickly drop spots as that blue smoke was kept coming through those exhaust. And if you don't know what blue smoke is, that means you're having an engine failure. So, man, I like Bowman a lot. I think he's a super good driver, has a great personality, and he was running top 3 all day. And man, this just sucks for that 48 team who hasn't had a ton of momentum this season.
Yeah, it sure does. And blue is not good. blue,
Yeah,
blue equals bad. So it's really a shame he sees that, and he probably feels like your guy Ryan Blaney here saying like, what the heck is going on with these engines? This is I think the 4th expired engine of the year by this point. So it's kind of interesting to see what's been going on with the engine manufacturers. ECR is a huge name and the engine manufacturers for NASCAR. So it'd be interesting to take a deeper dive into that, as I personally haven't, to see what ECR has maybe been changing as well as the other engine manufacturers. So that's just a very interesting topic that has kind of been looming the past few weeks.
yeah, for sure. Great points there. But he would quickly drop back to 20th, and he would have to pull that thing into the garage at some point, which he eventually did do. But Larson still had over a second and a half lead, guys. No changes there, if you're wondering. But just to make our points even clear, as soon as we see Ty Gibbs get alongside Hamlin, Larson's lead went up to almost 4 seconds in a matter of 5-6 laps that these guys were battling. So it's just really frustrating because, these guys are trying so hard to pass. And then let's say Ty Gibbs gets clear of Hamlin. Well, I mean, it's almost unreachable and unattainable for him to try to even pass for the lead because of how far Larson is ahead. So it just to make our points even clearer, it's just so frustrating to watch.
Yeah, it really is, and something we haven't really talked about at Bristol at all. Lap traffic. But even for Larson, when he's catching lap traffic, it's not slowing him down at all, and it's not creating any more of a race. Because you're saying, well, like, oh well, second place is in a battle, so Larson's just pulling away because he's not in a battle. Well, even when Larson is side by side with someone, the person in second is still making up no ground on him.
Yeah.
Because this is just an absolute dominating race by Kyle Larson, and as if I'm just going to tear on Bristol more here, as if the track isn't bad enough for good racing in the first place. Kyle Larson's car is just makes the track look 3 times worse.
Yeah, 100%. Um, but quickly we'd see a bunch of guys coming for pit stops, and I was just sitting on my couch watching the race, hoping and praying that someone would have an insane strategy and some other driver would get in the lead. I was begging. Bunch of guys did some really cool pit strategies. Ty Gibbs in particular, he pitted from fifth. He could have ran a bunch more laps, so he decided to kind of pit a little early and see, maybe get out in the lead and do something. Um, but Larson, Hamlin, and Byron, who we haven't talked about a lot, they would all pit from the top 5. Um, Larson would try to stay out a little longer than expected, maybe hope for a caution, did not come. Um, but Hocevar would pit as well with Larson, and he would have a 22-second pit stop, which is absolutely insane. Usually the pit stops are like 9-10 seconds, so 22 is terrible, and it sucks for Hocevar, who has had running in the top 10 the entire day.
Yeah, you mentioned top 10. How about top 5? He's been passing drivers like Denny Hamlin at this track so far. So it's such a shame to see his day go up in problems like that. And I have confidence that Spire is going to be right back. For weeks to come, because no matter what this team has been running into with the perseverance and the speed they have had so far this year, I don't see a little pit stop problem like this to steer them completely in the other direction moving forward.
Yeah, and as the pit cycles would flow themselves out, unfortunately, Ty Gibbs would not be in the lead. He would be back and forth, unfortunately. But Larson said his name like 30 times today, and Denny Hamlin would come out 1-2. And I'm not even going to sugarcoat this, guys. I'm trying to make this podcast as interesting as possible. So I have no other further points until we mention the winner. But if you want to say anything, any points that you want to make until we get to the end, go ahead, because I have nothing to say moving forward.
Yeah, I'm going to make just one quick point. There will be 5 cars that we'll see not pit, including Tyler Reddick, Bubba Wallace, Ryan Blaney, Ryan Preece, and I'm sorry. There was actually only 4. It was only them, but yeah, we'll see them stay out, and they're eventually going to have to pit because the caution that they're looking for to help them leapfrog a bunch of positions, they're just not going to get it, as this race is going to continue to run green. So they're all going to eventually have to pit, which is going to bring no one other but Kyle Larson in that 5 car back to the front. And spoiler alert, he's going to win this race by just over 2 seconds over the 11 car of Denny Hamlin, who followed him for just about the whole race, almost kind of just shadowing him about 2 seconds behind.
Yeah. And I think at this point I was, debating turning off my TV, but I just wanted to see what Hamlin had to say in his post-race interview. And basically what he said was, look, I tried. I mean, I just never got the chance to even come close to passing him. And you could tell he was incredibly frustrated because he's been running second all day. And he was my pick to win. Unfortunately, did not get it done. But I mean, this is one of the worst races I've watched with the next gen car. I think it is the worst. There was not one point in this race where I got excited or was like, "Whoa, what just happened?" And I try to write some notes down for the podcast to talk about some interesting points. And I mean, I wrote down like 3 things, guys. So one of the more boring podcasts we're gonna have, but hey, we pushed through it. So hopefully you guys can push through it while listening. But yeah, just tough.
We try our best to make it entertaining, and we were saying prior to starting this podcast that this one was actually a little easier for us because it's a lot more opinionated. We really get to talk about and show our displeasures towards Bristol as a racetrack and the racing it gives us. So maybe thanks to Bristol in terms of the podcast making for us and us as podcasters, but for all fans, I think Bristol owes a lot of people an apology, especially the driver of that number 11, Denny Hamlin, because he had a rough day of driving 500 laps while seeing a white and blue Hendrick Motorsports Chevrolet right in front of him.
Yeah, but that's about it I have for the race. Gonna continue into my segment that you've taken over a little bit these past few weeks. But just some notable drivers who had some really, really strong days. Just want to touch on Kyle Larson and Denny Hamlin, like you said. 2 unbelievable days for those guys. And Hamlin didn't even get to lead a lap. But Larson would sweep the stages, get that win, get that coveted 60 points to push him closer to William Byron in the point standings. Ty Gibbs, unreal day. He's known to been this is his best track in my opinion. Hey, Chase Briscoe in 4th, your guy to win. Really, really strong day for that 19 team. And in the 5th,
they're nice and sleek.
yeah. Brian Blaney, top five. That pit stop in stage three really helped him close out the top five. So super strong day for those five guys.
Yeah, moving on from there, we're going to see William Byron, who was all the way in the back to start this race. He'll finish sixth, and a big day for the Trackhouse number one of Ross Chastain here. We see him end up finishing seventh with the 20 of Christopher Bell right behind him in eighth. And right before I hand this right back over to you, I'm going to make a quick point here on the ninth place finisher, 16 AJ Allmendinger. We mentioned him having a great starting spot, and you're probably saying, what could I possibly say about him? He didn't really move a whole lot throughout the race, but he posted the fastest lap of this race. And I don't know how, but I would love to see this lap with how Kyle Larson was running today.
Yeah, no, I was genuinely shocked when I was reviewing this race recap. Um, his lap was 15:38 and Larson's was 15:39. So how he got the fastest lap, no idea. And it's kind of funny after what happened at Kansas because we're a few weeks ahead. How much he talked pretty poorly on the engine, but that's pretty impressive from the ECR engines to beat out a Hendrick engine. But unreal day for him, and he was the last car in the lead lap, which is crazy. 9 cars finished on that lead lap, so super good day for him and much needed points for that Kaulig team. But Austin Dillon rounding at the top 10, his first top 10 of the season, just building on a strong resume, putting his head down, really, really going to work. And we're mentioning his name for the right reasons, not the wrong reasons, like we've talked about, like so many people talked about in these past few seasons. But Hocevar in 11th. He was the first Spire car. Josh Berry in 12th. Haley in 13th. Kyle Busch and Chase Elliott rounding up the top 15. So just, really solid days. Like for these guys, with how hard it is to pass here. We didn't mention a ton of names in this race, just mainly the top 10. So don't want to discredit any of these guys for how hard they worked.
Yeah, for sure. And I want to go back and just sit on Carson Hocevar here a minute. This is a guy that got really hurt by a pit stop with about 100 laps to go. So to see him end up fighting back to an 11th place finish maybe should make us shut our mouths a little bit and say, hey, you can pass here. But I'm going to kind of counter-argument that and say, well, he did have fresh stuff as everyone was stretching from their green flag stops about 40, 50 laps earlier. So it does go to show you that tire wear does make a difference at Bristol. So maybe if you introduce those different tire compounds like we mentioned on earlier, maybe it does make that difference. But I just don't think overall it's going to change a whole lot on finishing positions for the entire field, as everyone will be seeing both those tire options, possibly the same way and seeing the same strategies within them.
Yeah, for sure. But moving on, Reddick, Wallace, and the 35 of Riley Herbst, all Trackhouse had just not the days you want at Bristol, where they've known to be pretty dominant. 18th, 19th, and 28th for Herbst. So, and they were struggling all day. A lot of wiggles and just rough laps for Reddick. I think he was fighting the car all day. I think he had a couple steering issues down pit road. So unfortunate, but I'm sure he'll rebound this season. But Ryan Preece, who we mentioned, got the free pass a few times. He would safely get home in 20th. So nice to salvage a top 20 for him. And he's putting a strong resume together this season as well for RFK.
Yeah, and I'm going to take a step back on what you said earlier about the 2311 cars. You called them Trackhouse, and let's not get them confused here, as Trackhouse actually had a pretty good day with the one car of Ross Chastain. So to finally see them right up front is great for them. And to mention the 2311 cars of Herbst, Wallace, and Reddick, this is a team that has been struggling as of late. And I hope this team is able to figure it out and start trending in the right direction again, as Bubba Wallace has kind of been the leading driver here. And, I say leading, and he's putting together top 5 finishes, but that should be Tyler Reddick's job too, and he's kind of been nowhere to be seen.
Yeah, so, and he got a ton of stage points too. I think we mentioned that last week. But he's been finishing consistently top 10 in the stages, so super cool. But yeah, definitely with Ross Chastain, he was the biggest mover of the day, going from 35th to 7th. So that's back-to-back weeks with pretty bad qualifying efforts, but super good race finishes. So, maybe the qualifying is not the problem, or it is the problem, and the racing is not the problem. So, they've definitely picked up some momentum from these past 2 weeks that we talked about them.
For sure. And that's a team that is going to continue to trend up, in my opinion. They have some really good tracks on the schedule coming up as we got Talladega the following week. Chastain's a winner, so it'll be interesting to see how it'll pan out moving forward.
Yep. And just to close out, um, Michael McDowell, unfortunately, in a 30th place finish, the lowest Spire car, didn't have the car today. Was fighting it all day. Didn't have good pit stops. Just unfortunate. And then we'd see Alex Bowman obviously DNF'd. SVG would DNF. Josh Bilicki, who we didn't mention at all, he would DNF for an engine problem as well. So, um, pretty pretty unfortunate for Bowman. I keep talking about him, but man, he had such a fast car, led a bunch of laps, and just had nothing to show for it. So, um, I'm not worried that he's gonna be too upset by this, but um, hopefully he can build off this in some way for the playoff race with Bristol this upcoming fall.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I believe that closes out qualifying there, unless you have anything. Or I'm sorry, qualifying. That closes out the final race standings there, unless you got any last things to mention, or
No,
we can move on to our
that
picks
is
for
it.
Talladega.
Yeah, I'll let you lead us into that.
All right, so going with my pick for Talladega, biggest track on schedule. It's a monster super speedway down there in Alabama. Well, I got to go with none other than my pride and joy from Olive Branch, Mississippi, and the 47 Ricky Stenhouse Jr. He's that
I
super
knew it.
speedway merchant. I can't leave him by my side, so I can't leave him. I should say he's got to be right by my side here for these super speedways. He knows exactly where to put his car. Great spotter, Tab Boyd. So it'll be interesting. Probably watching him qualify in the back, probably outside the top 30, getting that balance that he'll want, and the speed will be there. So to see what he can do with that 47 car, I'm looking forward to it.
Good pick. I was debating going with Kozlowski. I had that pick set in stone, and then I was like, I can't. I have to go with my boy from High Point, North Carolina, Ryan Blaney. 3-time winner at Talladega. So that was my pick. Obviously, we know what already happens, but you guys will have to wait for that podcast to come out. But two good picks, and that's all I have for Bristol.
Me as well.
All right. So we just want to thank you all for pushing through that podcast with us. Sorry if that was pretty boring. We tried to make it interesting, giving as much opinionated points as we could. But we will see you guys next week for the Jack Links 500 at Talladega. We want to thank you all for listening to the Food City 500 at Bristol, and have a great day, everybody.
Yep. See you later, everyone.